Hi, good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. Sharon Travis is our presenter this morning. I'm Darlene Williams with You Have the Power, and this is Caitlin. And Susan is helping us with tech support. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to put your questions in the chat, and we're going to talk about the dynamics of domestic violence.
Okay, thank you, Darlene. I appreciate you, and welcome to everybody who's on the call. I want to say I appreciate that you guys have interest in this topic, because that means there's opportunities for change. And anytime we have, even if it's just a handful of people who are willing to listen about a very difficult topic, it's always my pleasure to have this conversation with you. And that's what it's going to be, more of a conversation. When we're talking about the dynamics of domestic violence, we are talking about something that is like a difficult problem. It doesn't have any easy solutions, no one quick entry point. There is like no easy answer. It's not a one size fits all situation. So we're going to talk about the dynamics, because the dynamics pretty much are salient. They're the same. They're very consistent. So, but how it might show up in different people's lives is very unique. So we just want to kind of be mindful of the uniqueness of the problem as it shows up in individual lives, as well as the consistent dynamics that we might be able to recognize that can help us kind of get in front of some of these issues and or be a support if it's already an issue. So that is that. Just a little bit about You Have the Power. So it was founded by Andrea Conti, who I believe is on the call. Hi, Andrea. And some of you might recognize her as a former governor of Phil Bredesen's wife, but know that she is a force all unto herself, aside from being his wife. And so she founded this organization in 1995 to focus on providing services and information through the lens of survivors, right? She wanted there to be some kind of support for people who are having to navigate the system due to no fault of their own. And as a result of that, they produce documentaries, resource guides, and provide training such as this. The mission of You Have the Power is to empower victims of crime through education, advocacy, and understanding. Just some group norms for the conversation we're going to have today. First off, take space, make space. So what that means is if you have something that you want to say, some way that you want to engage in this conversation, please use the chat. We are in webinar form, so I can't actually unmute you and hear you, but we can definitely wear the chat out. We also have a Q&A button at the top. So if you have a question that you don't want everybody to hear, but you don't mind everyone hearing the answer. So you have a question that you don't want to be identified with, but want everyone to get the answer. That is your way of doing that, where we will ask the question for you out loud. No one will know it came from you. Don't yuck my yum. So we all have our own perspectives. We all have our own vantage points that we come at this issue from. So if you don't see it quite the same way as another person might in the chat, we want to be respectful of each person's opinion. Assume best intentions, even if it's something that you feel like they should know or should be common sense, may not be. Right? So let's assume that they have the best intentions in mind. And the goal of this is to educate. And so we want to make sure that we're creating that space, a safe space to have this conversation and to educate. Stay present as much as you can. And what's learned here leaves here, and what's said here stays here. So if anyone discloses anything or shares their own story or any part of their story, in the chat, we want to respect their privacy, but we also want to learn a lesson that they may be teaching us through their story and share that. share the lesson, but not the details. And know that this is all about you as we're having this conversation. How do you show up when it comes to this issue? May not be an issue that you personally deal with, but how are you showing up for other people? How are you showing up as a support? How are you showing up as an advocate? All those things are important. And most of all, take care of yourself. This is a tough issue. It's a tough conversation. It's a tough process to even kind of go through and think about how people are handling this. Yesterday, I happened to just go watch some videos on domestic violence, and man, I had to take a breath. I had to step back because I saw a video where the gentleman was actually in the midst of abusing or something that happened fairly recently. And it was hard, right? It was hard on me. And this is something that I do. So taking care of yourself is primary here. Making sure that if you need to take some deep breaths, since you're not online and we can't hear you, if you need to walk, if you need to run, whatever, not run away, but if you need to do whatever you need to do, walk in place, please make yourself a priority as we have this conversation. Okay, we're going to start off with a video that was produced by You Have the Power, and it says, "Not everyone comes in with a black eye." If I do, can you guys see the video right now? Susan, can I hear from you? Can you see the video actually, or do I need to stop the share and start over?
We can see it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Caitlin. Appreciate it. Always need a little tech support here. Okay, so we're going to get started with this, and then we'll come back and talk about it a little bit and then move on in the presentation. Thank you. And Caitlin, if you can't hear it after it gets to that point, please let me know.
I guess I thought sometimes that it was okay as a kid growing up, not really knowing. And as a teenager, you know, I thought certain things was okay, and that's why I dealt with it. Until, you know, last year and a half ago, then I was just fed up with everything. I thought I loved him, and I thought that he would change. He had my mind, if you can understand what I'm saying. Literally, I did not have control of what I can think or anything. It was like he was in me, and I can't explain it. He had my mind. That's all I know how to say.
Not everybody comes in with a black eye or a broken bone. Verbal abuse is rampant. And if you're told, you know, you're stupid, you're ugly, you're worthless, nobody but me is ever going to love you again, it does a lot to the self-esteem, and it really hurts productivity. And I think a lot of times employers just think they're lost interest in their job, or they're something else is going on, and they're just not interested any longer.
He didn't really like me working. I mean, it was always a problem because he didn't want me to know anybody. He didn't want me to talk to anybody, just him and his family. So if I was on a job and I really liked it and I talked about it, then I couldn't go back the next day because, you know, what are you doing there? Or he was always at every break, even 10-minute breaks, you know, just sitting out in the parking lot, just waiting and looking for 8 hours, you know, so that was like embarrassing. I just always called the police. And by me calling the police, so many times they said that it wasn't safe for my kids to be with me. Instead of helping me and getting me out of a situation that I was in. They took my kids. Maybe years. I knew I wanted to leave, but just didn't know how. I was like in a deep depression this last time for 2 years, like in the bed. I mean, my kids was, you always in the bed. They didn't know what was wrong with me, you know. I never told a soul, never told anything.
Okay, so when we are looking at,
We have a
they're still
historic
talking back
opportunity.
there. Let
We're
me get
not
rid
going
of
to come
that.
in second place again. We're talking about
Congress officially launched a major round of hearings into the events of January.
Okay, can you see my screen now, you guys, or do I need to reshare? Nope.
not right now. I think you need to reshare it.
Okay, there we are.
Yep, we see it.
See it now? Thank you. I appreciate the
yeah.
feedback. Let me see what's going on in the chat here. Okay, is there any questions that we need to answer, or are we good? Let's go back up. So we good on the chat, ladies?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So when we're talking about domestic violence, it is the kind of the bigger umbrella for two types of situations. One could be intimate partner violence, where it's someone that you have some type of familiar relationship with. And the other one could be or romantic relationship, or some kind of relationship that is a little more than a family relationship. The other type is a family relationship. It could be brother and sister, or parents, or I mean, not parents together, but a parent on a child. It could be a grandparent on a child, you know, so know that you might hear people say intimate partner violence, and that is meaning just what it says, intimate partner violence. And then the other, domestic violence, can be, you know, whoever that is part of your kind of circle. So it's a familiar relationship, but not necessarily a romantic one. And the most important aspect of this definition is to know that this is not about just violence. It's not an anger management issue, but it's about power and control. Okay, and the one thing that all of these kind of forms of violence kind of have in common, like sexual violence and domestic violence in particular, is that it's not about sex and it's not about anger, but it's about power, control, domination, manipulation. How can I control you? Okay. And so another definition that I was able to pull down from the Delaware Domestic Violence Coalition, which all the coalitions pretty much are very similar, and I just happen to like the way they worded theirs. So that was violent and abusive behavior in relationships that results from a complex mix of learned behavior, cultural values, and historical precedents. So I like those three issues being brought up. You know, yes, it could be about your culture. It can be about just kind of patriarchy and how people are seen. And we also know that it's not always male on female. However, that is the most dominant or predominant one that we see in our stats. So, and it could also be learned behavior. You saw it, so you think that that's normal, and you know, you normalize that into and take that into your own personal relationships. And so we kind of already talked about these two forms. Okay, so now it's time for you guys to talk, because one thing I don't like is to do all the talking. I want to know where you guys are and what you're thinking and what your thoughts are. So in the chat, I would like you to share with me some words that you think of when somebody says healthy relationship? Start with that. Healthy relationship. Anything, just whatever comes to your mind. I see the chat populating. Susan, would you mind sharing what's being?
Sure. We're seeing trust and open communication,
Good.
supportive. Well, great things.
Yeah, good.
Equality and honesty.
Oh, equality is a good word.
Both
Honesty,
parties,
they're all good. What was that one?
both parties making equal decisions in the relationship.
I love that. Love that. Mutuality. Mm-hmm. All good.
Respect and comfort.
Respectful comfort.
Respect, comfort, and physical safety.
Oh, wow. Those are 3 good ones. Love that. Love those.
We're covering a lot of ground here.
Yeah. I see another one popped up. Okay. So I think we have a pretty good kind of baseline for healthy relationships based on what you guys shared in the chat. Now let's talk unhealthy relationships. What pops in?
Isolation.
You broke up, Susan. Isolation.
Demeaning language.
Okay. Demeaning language. What else? Can you go back after isolation? You broke up.
Jealousy.
Okay. Good.
Oh, we've got a lot come in. Mind control, controlling behavior,
Wow.
lack of support and compassion,
Wow.
blame, past abuse.
Mm. Good. Good. Good.
Ooh, gaslighting.
Oh.
No balance or ability to work together.
Ooh.
Pressure to cross boundaries.
Mm. Ooh. I don't know. I think we were more engaged on the unhealthy relationship than the healthy relationship. We really got a lot of good words, a lot of good dynamics going on there. All right, now abusive relationship.
We had unwilling to change as part of, I think that was sliding into the buzzer on unhealthy relationship there.
Oh, okay, okay.
Like that would also probably qualify for
Abusive relationship. Where are we on that one?
physical violence,
Okay.
rape and unwanted sex,
Oh, okay.
control with fear,
Oh.
public display of anger or violence,
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I see another one pop in. What do we got?
yeah, oh, actually a couple of physical, emotional, different types of spiritual abuse, suppressing somebody, and somebody else mentioned financials.
Oh, good, good.
All the different flavors.
Yeah. So I was looking at this spectrum, and I get healthy. I think we're clear on that one. And then there's unhealthy, and then there was abusive. And I'm like, what's the difference? Is there a difference? Anybody have any thoughts? So as I was looking at unhealthy and abusive, and if you have a thought, you just pop it in the chat. I feel like unhealthy behaviors can become abusive, but they don't necessarily start out as abuse, right? And so I think that's the space where you can begin to see some of the red flags, especially if there's an unwillingness to change, which I heard somebody say. So it's really more about intent. Someone can be unhealthy because they didn't have like good communication skills. They were never taught good communication skills. They don't know what that looks like, but they're willing to learn. They're willing to change. They recognize when you say, that felt abusive, that they're gonna step back and check themselves, right? So there's this willingness to check yourself, willingness to not become abusive, willingness to move back down to the healthy side. And when there's this unwillingness to do that, and the motive is power and control, domination and manipulation, that's where it's abuse. And so I just feel like it's important to delineate between, because a lot of us may have some unhealthy relational habits or unhealthy relational kind of expectations, just based on some, maybe culture, maybe what we saw, maybe some unrealistic expectations, but that doesn't mean it has to be abusive. So just recognizing that there's a line there, but a very fine line. Okay. And so when we're talking about the cycle of abuse, right? And this is when we can see things escalate from maybe just unhealthy towards that abusive side. So we're going to start out with maybe the tension building stage, where maybe the pressures of life are stepping in. And I think right now, one of the things that we were seeing, especially in the beginning of COVID, was an uptick in domestic and sexual violence calls to the hotlines all across the country, because of this whole new way of life that we had to kind of embrace and kind of had to endure and figure out. It was tense for everybody, tense for teachers, tense for children, tense for any individual who had to just stay in the house and quarantine, tense for the people who were dealing with the effects of COVID, the impact of COVID, by actually having it and or family members that have it. So life happens and tension builds, right? Then the next piece is, where do I go? So I explode. So an abusive incident happens. So it could be verbal, it could be emotional, it could be physical, it could be sexual. And when you guys were talking about abusive and unhealthy behaviors, you were naming all these things. It could include anger, intimidation, threats, gaslighting, and all other forms of abuse, right? So then there's this big explosion, something happens, and then afterwards, there's this honeymoon phase where the abusers apologize and they show remorse, they're giving you gifts, they're showing you all kind of love in quotes, okay? And then there's this calm after the storm, where everything seems to normalize until life happens again and the tension builds, and then we're back into this cycle again. All right. And so one of the things we wanted to look at was this power and control wheel, because a lot of the things you guys named are on here, and I hope you can see this. This one I pulled out had a little more detail on it that I don't always see on some of the other power and control wheels. So I think it added pets and property abuse. And I think anytime we see people abusing pets and or destroying property, that's a huge red flag. Okay. I think the young man who was the shooter in Texas at the Texas school was abusing cats before it became shooting people, right? Red flags that lots of people missed along the way before it became like this serious thing where I don't know how many kids were killed. Was it 16 people were killed before we got to that? There were red flags everywhere with this young man that we missed, and how do we miss all of these red flags? Is there anything going on in the chat that I should be aware of before I continue to move on?
Nothing at this time, and there's a few that were supplying different types of abuse.
Okay.
I think we've moved now.
Okay. So I don't know how we miss these red flags. I think sometimes we miss red flags because we know them or they live next door It always baffles me when I see people do these egregious things and then they go talk to their neighbors and they're like, I can't believe that could happen here. Well, why not here? Like, so let's know that this type of abuse is not prejudice. It doesn't stick to in any particular neighborhood. It's not just something that happens in certain cultures. It is pervasive. It knows no limits. It knows no boundaries. It is everywhere. So I don't think we should be surprised that these things happen in our neighborhood. And so don't miss the signs, the red flags, because you think you're living in a safe space. No, anybody is capable at any time of being an abuser and or of being abused. And so the other one on here that I don't think is normally on there is using culture and social abuse, especially when we are talking about this culture that we're living in now, where everything is in social media. So social media has added a whole nother layer of abusive tactics, of ways that people can be manipulated and controlled in a way that is even more pervasive than getting hit, because it's not just how you and that person are interacting, but this is a whole community of people that are seeing and hearing these things and buying into whatever story or form of manipulation and intimidation might be going on the internet. So just be mindful of the changing dynamics of our culture. All right, so don't want to leave it with just abuse. So we know what power and control looks like, and you guys named a lot of them when you were talking about financial abuse, social abuse, gaslighting, all of those things that you guys named in your part of it, right? So here, let's make sure that we're paying attention to what equality looks like, because you named a lot of these when I asked you what a healthy relationship looked like. And so how do we go from what might be unhealthy over here to promoting healthy relationships? One of the challenges I used to see, especially when I worked with teenagers, is they had no problem identifying what was unhealthy, but they had a heck of a hard time coming up with what was healthy. And even when I was asking them to develop skits and develop narratives around it, they had to start with a slap, or start with somebody getting cussed out, or start with some form of abuse first before they could get back over to the other side. And I'm wondering how we can shift that, where we're modeling what's healthy first, and it's harder for them to come up with what is unhealthy, right? And I think a lot of it has to do with kind of reality TV and different ways that we consume media of all forms. And so what makes news is what's unhealthy. It's if we're looking at a news program right now for maybe an hour or so, let's count how many healthy, equitable relationships we see versus how many we see that are based in violence and abuse. And so what we're bombarded with is the violence, the abuse, all of those kinds of things, coerciveness, intimidation. And it doesn't even matter who we're talking about. This could be even happening in Washington, D.C., right? So it doesn't matter where it's coming from. It's still more of the negative as opposed to the positive. So how can we flip that? Is it flippable? Let me ask you guys that. Do you think we can change what we're seeing and how we're consuming it, where it's more on the positive and it's lifting up the equitable side of the equation? Or are we constantly having to battle between the two? Any thoughts? I don't see anything happening in the chat. Okay. So we know what is healthy is all the things you guys named: negotiation and fairness, economic partnership where one person isn't controlling all the money, non-threatening behavior, respect, trust, support, honesty and accountability, responsible parenting on both sides, and shared responsibility. We also know when it comes to domestic violence, and I want to make sure I say this, that it's not always in a binary kind of situation. It's not always male and female. There's definitely non-binary folks who are dealing with these issues, and probably even a little bit more intense because of the extra layer of abuse that comes from, or lack of understanding that comes with being a part of the LGBT plus community. I see something in the chat. Anybody want to share that with me?
Yes, it says you have control over how much media you consume. The
Mm.
news will always be the news. They need ratings and good clickbait, but you can decide what pages to like, friends to follow, etc., to help your feed be more positive.
Absolutely. So it is more about vetting what you're taking in and controlling what you're consuming. I think that's absolutely correct. The news is going to be the news, and clickbait is going to be clickbait. Very true. Very, very true. But I do think when we're talking about younger people where they don't have the abstract thinking function, the adults in the room have to be the ones to help the vetting process happen as well. So we can't leave that to them because they don't have the skills yet. They're concrete thinkers still. So helping them to understand it in a concrete way and using media as an example of here's what we don't want to do and this is what we want to lift up, especially if they're watching things like reality shows, you know, or keeping up with the Kardashians or whoever they might be keeping up with, right? Making sure that we are there to create conversation and make sure that we're having these conversations about what's healthy and what's unhealthy. So here are some things that are obvious about domestic violence, and that's obvious: injuries, inappropriate clothing. And when we say inappropriate clothing, it would be you wearing a turtleneck today in Nashville when it's 100 degrees, right? Not inappropriate clothing because it caused anything, but clothing that just don't seem to match the weather and the times that may be hiding something. So absenteeism, especially if you're in the workplace, if there's high absenteeism, you may want to check in. High anxiety, fear, or emotional distress, isolation, constant calls or texts with strong reactions, personal visits, or waiting outside and watching someone, especially in the workplace, being dropped off or picked up at work so there doesn't seem to be any autonomy. And you got to be careful what that could be. They don't have the money for 2 cars, right? So there are all kinds of other things. We don't want to jump to conclusions, but we do want to heighten our alert when we see some of these things. And comments of inaccessible funds or transportation that may not be linked to poverty, right? Or linked to those kinds of things or lack, but more linked to power and control dynamics. All right. Is there anything in the chat I should be aware of before we go to scenarios? Let me see. Let me go into the chat, see what's going on. We could provide, Ashley, tell me more. Provide positive resources. What could that look like? And while we're doing that, are you guys going to unmute Ashley?
I believe I've unmuted her.
Oh, well, she has to unmute herself. Ashley, do you want to share? And you can share in the chat if it's easier. In the meantime, I am going to some scenarios that we're going to process and discuss. Can you see my screen? Client Liz?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, so I'll read it and then we'll talk about what forms of abuse we might see. And I have some questions that I'll ask that are on the screen after this that you guys can just type in the chat for. And Ashley, if you are willing to share, you can just do it in the chat, or if you can unmute yourself, we'd love to hear your voice. So here we go, it's Liz. My partner, Chris, has abused me for 5 years. I'm very scared and I can't take it anymore. Everything started when they got jealous of my friends in 2010. The last time we fought, they told me they hated me and called me bad names. I called the police and they were arrested, but released due to a lack of evidence. Chris won't give me money and I don't have keys to our apartment. I don't know where the money goes. They are very abusive when they are drunk. We met at AA and they became really close with my 2 kids. I don't know who they are anymore and I don't know what to do. Okay. Let me share. Let's go back. Okay. Are you seeing my PowerPoint right now?
Yes.
What did you think about that particular scenario, besides the fact that I missed some of those personal pronouns, which I did on purpose? Anything in the chat? What was most surprising and what was most frustrating? Any of those questions? And for my panelists, you guys can talk too. So I see something in the chat right now.
Yeah, Christy's pointing out that he has mind control over her.
Yes, there's
Detail
definitely
about how close they were with kids, made me question their safety. I think for me, the frustrating part, nothing was done due to lack of evidence. That speaks to sometimes how we just look, like they said, not everyone comes in with a black eye.
That's right. That's right. Very good. Good points. Anybody else have anything in the chat on there? I see some more stuff in there.
Robin saying something similar, being able to be released to abuse again.
Right.
Even more so. Lou Ellen saying they could be codependent since they met in AA.
Right. Very good. Good points. And also that it doesn't necessarily have to be a male or binary relationship. It could be whoever, right? So I just wanted to make sure we recognize that it's not always male on female. It could be whatever. It could be trans. It could be queer, within a queer community relationship. So all of those things. I see something else in their chat too.
Yeah, and also pointing out the frustration, not clear what resources are available for where to turn.
Excellent point. Yes.
If police won't help, she feels alone.
Yes. I think one thing that I felt stood out with hers is like she just didn't know what to do or where to go, which aligns with what her comment was.
For sure.
So what are some of the tactics of power and control that the abusive partner in this scenario used? Anything in the chat? And while we wait, Susan,
Money, financial abuse, keeping her from having the keys where they live. So just access, intimidation.
Yes, great. Excellent. Excellent.
And that's another good point, could be using kids since they were close, could be using kids against her being close to them.
Yeah, I would be very concerned about the kids for a couple of reasons. Number one, what they're witnessing on a regular basis, this unhealthy dynamic and how that might speak to them. And, you know, their own physical safety. You never know when that abuser will turn on everybody.
Definitely.
Even if it's accidental. Okay, anything else in the chat before I go to the next one?
Lowering resilience. I think that's another one. Yeah.
Good. So what are some of the signs exhibited by the abuser? I think we kind of did that one, didn't we? And I don't know, was there any other family, friends, or anybody else that we could see in that story or hear in that story that we're observing? I don't think so. I think the other story will have some of that. So we'll go to the next one. So what are some of the barriers the victim faced? And is there anything the people in their life could do, even the ones we don't know of, but is there anything anyone could do to help?
Robin with exit plans. Yes.
What was that?
Exit plans.
Absolutely. Exit plans, safety plans. Maybe reaching out to the people who are in her life that, you know, care about her, are concerned about her, because isolation is one of those big things that abusers use, you know, so that help can't get there. Anything? I'm seeing some more stuff in the chat.
Yeah, advising her of local organizations, those that work with victims of abuse, because I think that uncertainty of where to go, that would definitely educating is part of it.
Absolutely. Good points, you guys. I don't know if did they say she worked, or would there be any potential security or safety concerns beyond the immediate stuff that you guys could think of in this situation? And how might this, if she is working, how might this situation impact her employment or their employment? Anything in the chat?
Nothing about employment. Llewellyn's mentioning police in Davidson County have to offer counseling, shelter, and resources when arresting. So depends if she took this information or did not take it.
Okay, cool beans. All right, well, let's take a look at another scenario. Great job, you guys. I appreciate it. Okay, I see what you got going on here. All right. Okay, the second one is share. And it started with a verbal argument. Bart, the father of our daughter, threatened to lock me out of the house. Then he said he would take our daughter away and I would never see her again. The police were called and came to the house. I am afraid for my safety because Bart isn't taking his medication and his behavior has been scary. Bart is always controlling and jealous. We had a fight last week where our apartment got trashed. Our daughter was very upset that night and cried a lot. I called the police that night too, but no one was arrested, even though we were bleeding. Bart works, but my daughter and I don't see a dime of it, and I have to go to the food shelter. He spends all of my county money on liquor and going to bars with his girlfriends. I have tried to keep what I get from the county, but he's my ride to and from my employment plan meetings, so he knows when I have money. Bart is waiting for me in the parking lot right now. He is very abusive when he is drunk. I do not want my daughter alone with him. Okay. So what are we hearing there? What was most surprising or most frustrating in that particular scenario? Anything in the chat?
Nothing yet. I bet it's coming.
For me, oh, okay, there you go. My most surprising thing is that he takes her county money for her and her daughter's food to spend on his girlfriends. Girlfriend. Like, wait a minute. Okay, all right, that was just me.
Yeah.
What do we got in the chat?
Carissa feels the same way I do. Frustrating the fact that they were both bleeding and nothing was done.
Wow.
Ashley remarked she feels unsafe not only for herself but for her daughter. She could use assistance with an order of protection.
Yes.
First, admit the problem, find resources.
Good points. So if this is your friend, what are you saying to her?
What I'm not hearing is a willingness or one desire to do something different or get away.
Exactly. I don't hear her saying, I want to leave. I heard more of it in the first story. In this one, I don't hear that. It's almost a resignation. So what do we do when someone's not saying they want to go? How do we handle that? I see something in the chat.
Christy is suggesting, let me come and get you and make a plan.
Okay. Anybody else? Good point.
But I think, but Christy's also one that was saying first admit the problem. I think she's,
Yes.
if I'm
Okay.
interpreting right, that's recognizing that share, is it share?
Yes.
That scenario? Yeah.
Yes. I think in Cher's case, there is not that recognition that there's a problem. And I'm not even hearing a desire to want to leave, just a desire for change. In the chat, I see a couple things.
Yeah, and well, hang on, let me scroll back up. The calling hotline to protect the child. I will say that Cher is at least recognizing that it's not a healthy situation for her daughter. And Carissa admitting that she and her daughter are in danger. Make an exit plan, get out of that house. She needs to make this change for her daughter, at least, if you're trying to persuade her to recognize the problem. Good point. Ashley, as a DV advocate myself, I would safety plan and pick her up and place her somewhere else, let her sleep it off and talk the next day once she's able to unwind. Christy saying this will force her to take action. Oh, is Christy, is that in response to calling the hotline to protect the child, calling the hotline will force her to take action?
Well, we don't know. We'll see. I don't know. That's a good question. These are good points. I think it's hard when the person who is being abused is not acknowledging that they want to leave, because they'll probably go back. And then as a friend, I would be upset that you went back because I feel like you're in danger. And the thing we don't want to do is cut somebody off in those situations, even if they do something that we don't think is the smart thing to do. And I'm sure the advocate on the call understands that very well. I see, is there something else in the chat?
That was Christy entering yes, the hotline was what she was saying would force her in action. The child should not be forced to stay because of mom. And Ashley is saying, as the victim, they need to feel like they are being heard and allow them to make decisions.
Yes, very good. Very good. All right. So let's go back to the last one. I think we can pretty much all understand what the signs are, but go to stop the share. Okay, and the last scenario, this is I need to leave my husband Lee. We have 3 children together. I stay at home with the kids while Lee works for his cousin's business on the side. I don't know how much he makes. All I know is that I get $50 a week to make ends meet. Lee has always hit me, but I am a strong woman. But when he hit me in front of the children, I knew I had to leave. I never want to see the look in my children's eyes after they saw that. My husband and I have gone to our elders several times about this, and we get back together. His family promises that he will stop, and mine tell me to focus on being a good wife. I'm scared of leaving my husband. I don't know what he'll do. And my family, I don't know what he'll do to me and my family. It's not an option. Thoughts on that scenario? What's different? Okay, obvious financial abuse in this person, good. Yes, that's Carissa, what you said is exactly what I was thinking. In this scenario, this person is acknowledging that they want to leave. So we know that we can immediately move in and create a safety plan, get them out. All of the options that are available are there for her because she's there. She's like, I want out. And
What I'm noticing different about this one is the cultural aspect of it, where there's a real, like, her big reasons for staying are not wanting to go against the wishes of the elders, be it family or cultural.
Good. I hear you, Llewellyn, talking about church and family members don't live with this guy and have no business telling her to stay with him. Truth, right? And so this would be a form of religious abuse. Definitely, whooping somebody upside the head with whatever their values are based on, and they don't say what the religion is. So I don't want to assume, because it could be any religion. There are a lot of religions that have very traditional values. So yes, good points. All right, so let me share my screen again. Let's back. So we know that domestic violence, especially from the scenarios that we just discussed, it's not just physical. It's not a private matter. It's not private because it's not just impacting those two people. There are tons of folks in all three of those stories that are being impacted, as this kind of trickles out and waves out. And it's a societal problem as well. So it's not just relational, it's just not just personal, it's societal. It's impacting everybody. It's impacting the children. It's impacting their children's friends. It's impacting how they access the resources in the community and what we're able to make available for them. So this has rippling effects. Victims do not cause or provoke domestic violence. This is the toughest one, man, to stay out of victim blaming. I asked some friends of mine some questions about some of the things in there where they're like, sometimes people put themselves in certain situations, whatever. Okay, that may be true, but if that person in that moment is unsafe, it's irrelevant as to how they got there. It's not even important to discuss what you did or didn't do, or how you could have seen it different in that moment and in that time. I think there may be a space for them to have some kind of conversation with somebody where they're processing, some of these things out, but that's not the time when somebody's in danger. So we definitely don't want to victim blame. We know women are not the only victims of domestic violence. Domestic violence is not about anger management. It's about power, control, domination, and manipulation. And we know it's not easy for a victim to leave. So what do we need to do? And I heard some of that coming from some of you guys in the chat. Recognize the difficulty in sharing, like how embarrassing and how much shame is attached to telling your story and being honest, and especially if you're a person who never thought you'd find yourself in that kind of situation. right? So just being able to honor the disclosure if you're the person that gets it. Reassure them that there is help, reassure them that they don't have to stay, whatever reassurance looks like. Listen more than you talk. Don't make any promises, don't add any negativity, and just voice your concern and maybe awareness of what some of the resources are if they're willing to access them. But I really feel like the most important thing that you can be in that space is a support. And the one thing I may add would be asking them, how can I support you? What does support look like for you? You know, I know what I might do in that situation, but that may not be what they want to do. So I need to know how support looks and be open and willing to hear it and assist if it's possible. So I think the terms that I like to use are believe them, support them, and lean into how they want to be supported. Okay. And we know that there's safety planning. I hear some of my advocates on here talking about safety planning, understanding how it may impact their work, their employment, businesses, what it might look like to address domestic violence in the workplace. Like let's kind of like make this more of a societal participation where we are all paying attention to domestic violence and recognizing the red flags and knowing how to support someone, advocating for policy change. I know these all look like workplace type scenarios. Workplace, yes, but just in general as well. Okay. So anybody have any questions or comments or thoughts or anything else? Is there anything else in the chat? Let me stop the share.
If you guys don't have any more questions, we'd love for you to have questions, but we've got a quick poll that has some demographic information we'd like you to fill out real quick for us for our VOCA grant. So if you take it's like 3 quick questions. If you don't mind doing that really quickly, that would be great.
I was all ready to vote and then it told me I can't.
We'll add you in, Sharon.
Okay, and if you have any other questions or anything that you want to add, any comments, any thoughts of how we can do a better job of supporting victims of domestic violence. And look, it's not like we're not going to end it by just supporting the victims. We got to figure out what it looks like to change the dynamic for the abusers as well. I know that's a tougher question. I know we have BIPs or Batterers intervention programs and things like that. Is that enough? How do we maintain safety for the people who are being victimized and create opportunities for change for the batterers? To me, that's the bigger question that that we haven't kind of got any. Will we get an email for our advocate coordinator? Did you guys see that? Okay, gotcha.
Looks like a yes.
Yes, we will email everybody a certificate of participation after this is over, so you guys can turn it in if you need to. Sharon, do you have anything else?
No, not that I can think of. You're welcome, Christy.
Well, thank you guys for participating with us today. We appreciate it. I think it was really interesting.
Yes.
And yes, we can email a copy of this presentation to you guys for the PowerPoint. So yes, we can do that. Well, if that's all, thank you so much. And please stay cool. For those of you that are in a really hot location like we are, I just looked at the weather and they're now saying that we're going to be at like 104 next week for the temperature. So I need a pool to cool down. This is not going to be good. And I'm not a pool person, but thanks for everybody for being
Thank you,
here.
everybody.
And
Thank you, guys.
oh, Ashley says it's 103. Oh, Ashley, where are you? That's
Hey.
awful. That's awful. Yikes.
103.
She's in Henderson, so that's West Tennessee, right?
Oh,
Did I have
no.
that correct? It's West Tennessee? Yes.
Oh my goodness. Ashley, I feel for you. You need a pool really bad.
This is terrible weather.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, everybody have a great day and thank you so much.
The beach is good. Thank you. Thank you, guys.